Thank you all so much for joining us. We wanted to just put these in place and do a regular webinar series with you guys. We expect to do it quarterly. It's intended not to replace the regular written communication, to cover some of that same material, but also dive a little deeper into some fun stuff and do some more, tell some of the stories about what's happening on the farm. So today we're going to be covering a general overview on Farmland LP, just a little catch up. Some of you have been with us for a very long time. And we're also going to be discussing the farms and crops and doing a particular deep dive into blueberries, the organic blueberries that we planted at Burns, really as a way of showing you everything, kind of telling a full story about what goes into some of the things that we do. And then also talk about the financials, distribution, and forecast, and the preview on the distribution side is that we will be doing a distribution. It'll be about 3%, and it should be done in the next 30 days or so. So we've gotten the questions answered and the approvals on that, so that'll be happening very soon. Thanks for your patience on that. Sorry that took so long. And we'll also, just a reminder about the investor portal as well. Show you what's happening there, and that's a great place for you guys to learn about a lot of information. So just a quick few minutes on an overview of Farmland LP. As you know, we buy conventional farmland and convert it to organic, sustainable farmland as an investment fund. We're really focusing on adding value to farmland. This year, we've been doing this for 10 years now. We now manage over 15,000 acres and over $160 million in assets. And that's divided really between the two funds, about right now, half and half in terms of value. A little over $82 million worth of farmland in Fund 1, and about the same in Fund 2, and they're doing well. Again, a preview, your investment is up 69.7% net. So we've kind of updated the way that we talk about what we do. Is we're really focusing on adding value to farmland using sustainable agriculture best practices. And there are three key ways that we add value. Number one is getting the land certified organic. Number two is increasing the crop diversity and really growing the right crop on the right piece of ground at the right time in its 10 or more year cycle. And that includes switching from low-value commodity crops to organic vegetables, or to high-value permanent crops as well, such as wine grapes or blueberries. And then investing in infrastructure, and that includes both upgrading, getting some of the largest and most efficient tractors that are around, $500,000 purchases sometimes, and with also a really big focus on water. Climate change and water are a very big focus about what we do. So when we're buying farmland, it's a really great way of, it's kind of the cheapest and best way of actually buying some of the oldest water rights around, some of the best water rights, as well as the physical access to water as well. And then we'll often upgrade that. So switch the irrigation systems from flood irrigation to drip irrigation, which is much more efficient on a crop per drop basis, and generates higher returns. Usually, actually, it uses less water while increasing crop production with fewer weeds, and all of that results in higher profits. And here's an example when you look at the numbers of what we're doing here. So typically, we're buying farmland that was conventional seed crops or conventional row crops like corn, and converting that over to organic crops, such like organic vegetables or organic seed crops in rotation along with pasture. But there are certain pieces of ground that we can convert to higher value permanent crops. And so that could be wine grapes or blueberries. And there you can significantly increase your profit per acre and really change the dynamics of the farm. And we're going to dive into the blueberries examples, the blueberry example that we've been doing here. Here's just a quick example of some of the different kinds of technological improvements that we do. We'll talk a little bit about satellite imagery. We have upgraded the farm equipment in many cases, and we will dive much more into blueberries. Some of you may have seen this, particularly if you're in Fund 2 or you've been on a webinar for Fund 2, but this is a map of the plant hardiness zones. It basically looks at what the freeze level is during the winter, and we're buying really in temperate climates, nice climates that people both want to live in. It happens to be great for sustainable agriculture. And so we have farmland, our 15,000 acres is spread about evenly between Northern California, which is all Fund 1, Willamette Valley, which is split between Fund 1 and Fund 2, and then the 6,000 acre property that we bought in Walla Walla in Fund 2 as well. It's over the past 10 years, we've really grown. We have a great team, about 60 people total in the enterprise now. I'm going to let Randy and Kevin introduce themselves there on the call as well. Just to note that Jason, many of you may know, I think, but some of you may not. Jason has actually stepped back from the company. He's still helping out with livestock, with organic crop rotations, cover cropping, but he's really focused on farming his own 100 acres and also managing a nonprofit that he leads. And the executive committee that we have, which is along the top row, is really a pleasure to work with, and our farm team is really top notch. Randy, do you want to give a little bit of background about how long you've been here and what you do, what you've done?
So my name is Randy Struckmeyer. I'm the president of Green Spring Farms. I joined Farmland early in 2016. My role here is to really manage and just provide resources and lead and build a team of approximately 60 employees managing all the properties that Craig just told you. My background is probably 30 years, you call it, in agriculture, Dole Fresh Vegetables in the Salinas Valley, Harry and David, which is a big orchard operation in Southern Oregon, and then a local co-op in Willamette Valley before joining Farmland.
Randy's been phenomenal, about 3 years in really changing the way we do financial planning, operations, and management, working with the team, both really driving particularly the on-farm operations up in Oregon. Kevin, do you want to give a quick overview of your background and what you do for us?
Sure. Yeah, I've been with Farmland, I guess, a little more than 1.5 years now. My background is I have a bachelor's of plant science from Cal State Fresno, emphasis in veg crops. Well, actually recently took over Director of Farm Operations, which is overseeing the California, Oregon, and Washington properties, working on agronomy and rotations and all of the things to increase our efficiencies and profitability, and with an emphasis on sustainability and reduction of inputs and costs. Prior to coming to Farmland, I did a stint of doing wine grape development on the Central Coast of California for institutional investors, about 3,000 acres. And prior to that, I worked for a large family-owned, actually 2 large family-owned farming companies in the Central Valley of California, managing large operations and doing agronomy for about 25,000 acres on one, and then actually actively farming about 14,000 acres with a diversity of crops. Everything from, no pun intended, soup to nuts. I have a background in production, obviously, and I'm excited about the philosophy and the mission of the company, and that's why I made the decision to join in. So we've got for the most part, a good group of people, and part of what I do is helping in a personnel development, and I'm pretty excited about everything that I do.
Kevin's been really phenomenal the past couple of years, really deep expertise on the soil agronomy side, and also on the operations and process side, making sure that we're doing everything that needs to be done when it needs to be done, and that makes the difference in agriculture, managing 10,000 acres, 25,000 acres, and bringing that expertise to us. 15,000 acres, I think Kevin, you'd say we have a fair bit of complexity in terms of the number of crops that we grow and rotations. So there's some heavy lifting there, but it's been doing a phenomenal job. We won't cover the other guys, but there's more people than this who are on the management side, and it's just really a phenomenal team and organization to work with. Do come out to our farm days so you guys get to meet everyone. So let's dive into the crops side of things. So a little update on Fund 1 farmland. Some of you know some of this, but we'll just cover it in summary now. We can spend more time on it separately and in some of the write-ups. We sold 2 of the properties. We basically did a full strategic analysis over our portfolio. And we identified properties that were either too small to really farm efficiently or had very high costs associated with them, and that were kind of dragging down our overall profits. It didn't show great prospects for increases in the future. So we sold these 2 properties, Watt and Brentwood, doubled our money on both of those properties, so they were good holds, and sold them to good managers, so they'll be continuing to manage well, who really appreciated that they were already organic and been managed sustainably. But for example, Brentwood didn't have the potential for us to really convert to organic permanent crops in the future. And as part of this analysis, we really identified that Burns, our Burns farm, 4,200 acres, really has a tremendous amount of potential for permanent crops and continued organic vegetable rotations. So the map that you see in front of us is in the lower left corner. You see the blueberry fields, the phase 1 blueberry fields, about 150 acres. That's what we're going to be diving into quite a bit here. We expect to expand the blueberry operation from 150 acres to 600 acres. That's the blue fields just to the right of the current blueberry fields. And then you see kind of a purple strip in the middle. That's the 3rd expansion area that we expect to expand to blueberries. Also, the gray area in the middle has already been planted in olives for olive oil to a third-party tenant, so that's lease income, and we'll continue to expand the permanent crop side of things and also continue to expand the organic vegetables. We're working with some great organic vegetable producers on Burns as well. And Randy will talk a little bit about the Oregon farm operations when we get there. So a quick overview of the farm update. We're going to talk about blueberries, crop suitability and market, the soil preparation and healthy soil, some operations management, satellite imagery, and irrigation management, all of that being told within the blueberry story, but it gives you a sense of what we're doing more broadly. We'll talk a little bit about the Orland blueberries, olives, vegetables, livestock, and Oregon crops. So fair bit to cover. The blueberry side is really meant to be a story. I want to tell you really what's happened from start to where we are now, give you a really good overview. It's fun and exciting. So the blueberry market in general. So we do a lot of this analysis for a whole variety of crops, everything that we're doing. We're always looking at our strategic direction, all within organic and sustainable agriculture. And really, blueberries are an ideal crop that have some special growing conditions, which limit, in essence, competition, but that really present a tremendous amount of upside. In general, for blueberries, the blueberries are actually increasing in consumption compared to strawberries, raspberries, and blackberries. So around 27.9% of all the berries that people eat are now blueberries, and that continues to grow. And also berries and blueberries as a category are actually growing within overall fruits and vegetables. So it's a real growth market in an already nice market. And in the bottom part of that screen, you see that organic blueberry sales have really been increasing, albeit from a reasonably small base. compared to some of the other crops. So we think that has a lot of room to grow. But there's just tremendous preference for organic blueberries. It's viewed as a health food, and you see that volume increased 47.7% last year in 2018 versus only 2.5% volume growth for conventional blueberries. Organic blueberries are a real growth area. We take that overall market assessment and then we look at burns. In our overall permanent crop assessment, we identified fields that were perfect for growing blueberries based on agronomic practices. And then we really looked at the market window. Blueberries are produced from Peru and Chile, but also in this hemisphere, Mexico, California, Oregon, and Washington. And they ripen in that order as it gets warmer. And so each area has its own harvest window. And so the very early part of the season that you see that starts around March and April is Mexican production. And then that moves up into California, and they're in where we are in Burns, not a lot of organic blueberry production there. And so the prices are high. When Oregon and Washington production kicks in July, August, the prices really reach their low point because volume is so high. And then you get some very late season varieties and prices increase towards the end of the year. For the Burns farm, because of its warm weather and various factors there, we can actually hit that kind of early window. And you see in the chart the harvest window that we're targeting both from an agronomic perspective and from the specific varieties that we picked. That gives us a very strong market opportunity. And so what we then did is we went out and we identified the ideal partners and secured relationships with them to get the best fresh and frozen market distribution partners and the best plant varieties. Driscoll's is our fresh market partner. Firestone is our frozen market partner. And then Fall Creek is a great provider of great plant genetics. Driscoll's has its own proprietary varieties, so we're fortunate to be able to have both, and then we'll be able to compare and contrast this over two and see how we expand with either one of them or both of them over time. To give you a sense of timing, how long this stuff takes, and I'll be mentioning dates all the way along. So we actually put the order in to Fall Creek for plants in August 2017. We negotiated a very good agreement with Driscoll's, but it took a long time, right to the last minute, basically, to October 2018. And basically, they had a very restrictive agreement. They have very closed genetics. They have a great proprietary position, but we were able to negotiate a great agreement. If we had not signed that agreement, we just would have done 100 acres with the Fall Creek plants. We had prepped the ground for the additional 50 acres for Driscoll's, but if they hadn't agreed to it, we would have just done 100 acres instead of 150. We ended up signing that agreement, got the plants right after that, and our team did a really amazing job about getting those plants in the ground, and we'll show you some of those pictures. So August 2017, we ordered the plants. In March of 2018, this is what the plants look like up at Fall Creek Nursery in Oregon. And we ordered a total of 250,000 plants, 163,000 plants from Fall Creek, the rest from Driscoll's. And as you can see, they don't look like much. They're just little teeny tiny babies in this at this time in March of 2018, but they're healthy and robust plants. So now that we had the plants on order, at that same time, we're also working on making sure that the soil is prepared properly. And great soil, obviously you need great water, great growing climate, but you need great soil properties. And good soil chemistry is a foundation for having healthy soil biology. And blueberries have some very specific requirements. Blueberries have very essentially primitive root structure. They're very large roots. They're not really good at absorbing stuff. They need a very acidic soil to actually kind of break down the soils around them and make the minerals and organic matter available to the plants to be absorbed. And so pH is just absolutely critical. Normally you would do one test every 10 acres and get a nice grid on basically a 38-acre field or about 40-acre field that you'd see there. We would do about 4 tests. Most people would do around 4 tests around there. We know that if the pH is off, instead of 5.5 at 6.5 in a certain area, you're going to get much lower production for that whole area. And with some kind of cutting edge technology, we were able to do much more testing much more pH testing than you would normally do. And so the technology that we used allowed us to do 5 to 8 tests per acre, and basically create this grid by using this mobile pH meter. Measures other soil characteristics as well. And so the picture that you see in the middle is actually this rolling testing machine that we use called Veris. And we wanted to validate it against the more traditional testing, so we did a really tight grid sample with 1 test every 2.5 acres. We saw there was very good overlap between the two in terms of the general trends. So we knew that the Veris technology was really quite good, but we really wanted, but the Veris tech was much more granular and showed much more diversity and allowed us to actually design our sulfur application map, which is what we use to reduce the soil pH. To create the grid that you see to the right. All those numbers there are the pounds of sulfur that we applied per acre, and you see it ranges basically from 0 pounds per acre, because the soil was acidic enough, to, in some cases, 1,000 pounds per acre as well. That allows us to make sure we get a very uniform pH over the entire property, which allow all the plants to have very even vigor and maximum production on a per acre. That's what this is designed to do. So we laid down a good amount of sulfur. We also wanted to jumpstart the biology and the soil organic matter. So yes, we planted pasture again, brought in livestock to graze it. That really helps with the soil biology side of things. Also helps reduce weed pressure and other pest pressure. And a third component that we did, which is super important, but not appreciated within conventional agriculture, is mycorrhiza, soil fungus. And the mycorrhiza is a symbiotic association between fungi and plants. And basically, there's an exchange of nutrients. The plants are photosynthesizing, turning sunlight into sugar. And it actually passes those sugars from the roots to the fungus. The fungus has a much larger network of mycelium that go out through the soil, and it's breaking down organic matter, bringing nitrogen back. It's breaking down rocks as well, and bringing in soil nutrients and minerals back to the plant. And it's basically that symbiotic association, that exchange of sugars for mineral nutrients that provides that makes both of them better. And you can see on that kind of illustration there how the reach of the root system, in essence, extended with the fungus, allows you to get access to much more of the resources of the soil, and you actually see an image of that in the picture next to it. That's not blueberry plants. Blueberry plants, really, their roots only they're in the top, they're about 6 to 8 inches down and about 18 inches across. And by having that and focusing on that fungal association, we provide a much larger and much deeper access to soil nutrients for those blueberry plants, which increases the plant health, which increases the number of pounds that the plants can produce per acre. We asked Fall Creek what they thought about mycorrhiza. They had heard about it, but hadn't really seen good data for it. We asked Driscoll's about what they thought about soil mycorrhiza. They really don't have any growers who are doing it. But our understanding of soil biology says that the mycorrhiza specific for blueberries is different than other plants. It's the ericoid mycorrhiza, which are much finer and really have a long-term 140 million year association with plants like this. And so we found a producer to produce this ericoid mycorrhiza for us, and we've really seen very good results. And we're managing the plants actually to make sure that we have a great fungal network under there, not a bacterial network, but a great fungal network in the root system. This is, if we're wrong, we're wrong, but this was a very cheap, but it's, we think, a very powerful key to our health. And we'll show you some pictures why we think this really matters. So we did all that, the soil prep, then we did the ground prep. So June 18th, you see us starting to build the mounds here. We added rice hulls to add some fluff to the soil. Some people use processed recycled wood chips like plywood and particle board, and then put that in the soil. And don't tell anybody, I'm not a big fan of that. We used natural materials. So that was in June. In July, we started laying down the drip tube, and this is again 150 acres, 150 football fields worth of work that needed to be done in a short period of time. And these guys, our team, just did a phenomenal job. Here's a drip hose being installed in July of 2018. In September 2018, we already had our pump system up, and we wanted to test the drip system. So we basically irrigated the weeds up in that area. That had a second benefit of reducing the weed burden within that mound. And as you can see, these guys did a great job on laying the drip tube down, and the soil is very fertile, which is wonderful. And then we laid the weed mat down on top of it. This is a permeable layer that prevents weeds from growing through it, but it allows water and other nutrients to get in. But those drip tubes are underneath that weed mat. In October, then we're ready to, and we've been irrigating, fertigating, and chemigating, which means actually running fertilizers and chemicals through the pipes, again, for the soil prep. And now we're ready to start putting the plants in the ground. And so every 2.5 feet, we're getting ready to put the plants in, along with an inoculant for the ericoid mycorrhiza on each and every plant. Those teeny little plants are now come down in big boxes from Fall Creek, and about a truckload a day, a semi-truck full a day of these plants are coming down that are then being put out in the fields. And this is what the fields look like just after it was planted on October 24th. We, out of 250,000 plants, we had about 20 plants that died by the following season. So these guys did a phenomenal job. The plants were great. They did a phenomenal job planting it. They did a phenomenal job with the drip tube system as well. They just really did a great job. We also planted pollinator habitat. We got grants from the USDA. We planted pollinator habitat around the outside. Pollinator habitat will increase blueberry pollination and blueberry production. We also put in-row pollinator habitat as well, about every 7 rows, which is what the recommendation was. So you see some nice clover growing in the middle. There are some weeds, but you'll see that they're on the sides. We go through and we actually will mechanically remove those weeds. It's fine for the system. And you see the plants are healthy. This is spring in 2019, and the plants have grown. The plants are doing really well. They actually start around 12 inches high, and so this is one of the plants in in June of 2019. The plants really have done phenomenally well, both close up. And one thing that I really look for is making sure that all the production is even across all the fields. And that's what you see here is 150 acres, 250,000 plants, all based on variety, having a nice, even, strong, vigorous growth, nice green growing tips, and a lot of production. We specifically, some people do harvest this first year. We specifically didn't want to harvest. We would prefer that the plants focused on developing roots and shoots during this growing season, and we were successful with most varieties. There were a couple of varieties though that were very promiscuous, very prolific. This is a picture of Top Shelf, really producing a lot of blueberries. The flavor is really, really wonderful, best in class from anything that you'd find in a supermarket. The berries are large. These are modern varieties of berries. And in fact, a week and a half ago, we had Driscoll's come out after having visited about a month and a half ago. And really, they actually wanted to come out. The local field manager brought out the regional manager because they basically wanted to see what we had done in order to produce such great plants across all our fields. They only basically have a contract on 50 acres of our fresh fruit production, and they asked if they could actually contract if the other 100 acres was available for them to contract with as well. So we are talking to them about that. It's not under contract, so we would love to actually send the fresh fruit through Driscoll's as well. But this is next year during blueberry harvest season. We'll have an investor event, and hopefully this is an incentive for you guys to come out then. So this is what success looks like. I'm going to show you a neighboring property. This is not us, but I'll tell you just a couple quick slides on a neighbor property that's just about a mile away. So here's Bill Sable, our blueberry manager, and these plants were planted about a year before ours. And so at about 8 months old, this is what their plants look like. They had not prepped the soil properly. They had not irrigated properly. They just, where we did all the little things right, it looks like they just did a lot of the things wrong. And Bill loves blueberry plants, so he looks a little sad in this photo. And then, so this is in March of 2018, and if we look in July of 2019, so just when I was out there last, this is basically what that field looks like, and they're about where our plants are. Our plants are around 9-10 months in the ground now. These plants are a full year ahead of ours, but they really haven't done well. So Driscoll's really expects us to be about a year ahead in terms of our overall production, and we expect very good yields. This is great for fruit quality. This is great for total pounds of production that each plant can support. At maturity, we want each of these plants to produce around 10 pounds per plant, 10 pounds of marketable fruit per plant. So that's a good amount. That's why we're doing all this work on the root system and on the canopy and the sugar generation in order to create this really high quality organic from the get-go fruit. These guys planted it conventionally, and they have said that they want to convert it to organic to get that price premium. But to me, this is really a case of people doing everything wrong and looking at it as a chemical system instead of looking at it really as a biological system. Let's talk a little bit about the management side of things. And still focusing on the blueberries. These are our blueberry fields. We were able to get a pretty inexpensive system of regular satellite imagery on all of our fields every few days. This is using some Planet Labs technology on the back end, a fleet of Dove satellites circling the Earth. Pretty darn good resolution with NDVI analysis, basically looking at how much chlorophyll and plant vigor there is on this. And we have very easy apps so that we and our crop managers can see this. It has a lot of different uses for crop health, making sure that everything's being irrigated evenly. The example here is that you see that blue spot towards the top. We were doing our weekly meetings, and I originally thought that was some weed pressure that was on the ground. I thought it was plant issues. So shared it with asked the question of the blueberry manager, Bill. 2 hours later, they identified that there was a sub-main irrigation line that was broken, and that area was underground, overly wet. And so that's not actually green plant issue, that's just actually overly wet. He said that they'd fixed it within several days. That was not a problem that they would have seen for weeks, if not months, and it wouldn't have been until they drove a tractor across it and it got stuck in there that they would have really noticed anything like that. But with the satellite imagery, we were really able to see it basically within a week or so of it happening, and they were able to fix it, and that will result in very positive plant health going forward. This is an image from 6/20, so just a month later, showing that the blue dot is gone, so they definitely fixed that issue. But we also saw that field 8 at the very bottom was being irrigated a little too much. It was a little overly wet. He was using the same irrigation sets across. The soil type is a little bit different there, and that looked overly wet. Again, nothing that you would notice from just looking at it. So we have this entire system on a drip system, computer control system. This is a lot of information here, but the main thing to point out is that this automated drip system is computer controlled. You can see soil moisture at the probe spots, but the satellite imagery allows us to see what's happening across the whole field rather than just where the probes are. And Bill was able to go in and basically the day after we saw that image, change that irrigation set, and you see that blue arrow on the right side showing where he changed the irrigation set and brought that water level down to something that was really ideal for the plants. So pretty amazing technology, the combination of putting in the physical hardware for drip irrigation systems, using the satellite imagery, and by software being able to control the irrigation levels really speaks very well to just creating a perfect environment for these plants for production going forward. This is just the third image now is just the one that you haven't seen. It's just from a couple days ago and shows that the overwatering that is happening near the bottom has also now been resolved. In the middle there's a little bit of, it could be wetness, but actually it looks like those are plant varieties that are just really growing quite massively. The yellow spot in the middle there, that might be a variety that likes it's a different variety. It was a test variety. It likes a very acidic environment, and just looking at it, it's actually doing fine. I'm thinking that it's on my short list for looking at. Is that something that we just rip out and replace with one of the very high-performing other varieties that we have? So that was the blueberry story. Just wanted to give you guys a sense of kind of from start the analysis of our farm to the market analysis to the plant selection, partnership selection, to actually putting the plants on the ground and then seeing them produced. Ultimately, that's going to show up in really large increases in our revenues going forward, and Mark is actually going to talk about that when we talk about the financial projections. This is organic tomatoes also at Burns. We have leased a good amount of ground to Dwelly Farms. They're continually expanding from 300 acres to 500 acres to 700 acres, the amount of ground that they have leased with us. They're very good farmers, very good producers. They do tomatoes, organic squash on our ground, organic green beans, organic corn, and that's a great relationship in helping driving profit that's on a lease basis for us on the property. Going away from Burns as a farm, again, we sold those 2 properties and we bought a small blueberry farm north of Burns, about 66 acres of producing properties. It's actually how we got Bill Sable on board. Bill was a 20-year engineer at General Electric and really has a phenomenal management practices from that experience. And then spent the past 20 years growing blueberries. And this property provides us with some great economies of scale. Driscoll's has some test varieties up there. Stella Blue is the one that you see in the upper right corner. And from 150 miles up, you can tell that that's a special variety. They've asked us, and they have plants available for us to expand Stella more onto this property. So now we're going to switch over to, that's California. Randy, do you want to cover green bean, the Oregon crops? And Kirsten, just let me know that in about 5 minutes we want to do Q&A.
What you see on the screen is a snapshot of our crop map from 2017, 18, 19 actuals and the next couple of years out looking forward. These are acres. In Oregon, the Fund 1 property, it's centered down around Corvallis, south of the farm headquarters, approximately 700 acres out of around 5,500 acres total that we farm here between the 2 funds. The Fund 1 land is 100% organic. And the primary crops you see for growing on there, we do a mixture of row crops. Over the years, we've had beans and corn, and a couple of years ago, some squash. We also do seed crops, oats, specialty seeds could be turnips or phacelia, or it can be a variety. We do organic wheat, and we also do some clover. Pasture is used as a rotation, and the pasture can ebb and flow between the Fund 1, 2 land and the Fund 2. So you can see in 17 we had 240 acres, in 18 that fell off to 87 because we moved pasture rotation up to some Fund 1 land, and you can see we planted some extra seed crops instead. And then beginning in 2019, we're just shy of 300 acres of pasture once again for the Fund 1 land. Leases, we do leases to row crop producers on our land, and not much the last couple of years, and we have some additional leases that we put into place for the next 3 years. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's great, Randy. Due to time, we're going to move on. We can talk. We'll write up more on yield and price and things like that in the future. Kevin and Randy, you want to talk about green beans in Oregon?
Go for it. Talk about that.
Yeah, one of our plans in improving soil health and to follow our sustainable program is that obviously we are growing a fair amount of nitrogen fixing crops. Green beans being a legume, they produce a fair amount of their own nitrogen. That program goes up and down as demand requires, obviously, but it is a very good rotation. And just to piggyback on what Randy said, one of the things that we have started doing as part of our cover crop system is we will actually sheep these fields off. We'll move livestock onto them post-harvest to help clean up the residue. And that's typically accompanied with either planting some type of cover crop or overseeding some clover. The advantage of that is, again, we're replacing some of the nitrogen removed from the soil and gives us an opportunity to have minimal impact equipment-wise on the ground to provide winter forage for our livestock rotation. That's part of the whole plan as far as not overtaxing any particular piece of ground, either with livestock or crops. To the right of the screen there, you'll see a list. This is one of the software systems that we are currently integrating company-wide. Oregon was kind of the pilot project. Washington and California are now in it. It's called Granular. which we can do all of our on-farm tracking in one database. And it's basically you make up a work plan of what needs to be done on a field, so we can use it. Ultimately, it'll help us for a budgeting tool as well to help with timing and whatnot. And you see a list of operations that would normally go in an organic green bean, so that we have a record of time-wise of when things happen, what they did. It gives us an opportunity to look forward to maximize the efficiency on our equipment and operations and personnel. This crop work plan will vary a little bit depending on crop needs. We're working with a couple of crop consultants along with the farm team, where we're out actually walking these fields and looking at weed pressure and looking at disease pressure. Fortunately, with the organics and our timing, we are obviously limited to what materials we can use, so our execution of operations becomes that much more critical. So we are integrating this, like I said, in Oregon, it's pretty much integrated now, and we're rolling out California and Oregon as well. So all this information will be in one single database. So some of the things that we have done to improve our productivity and efficiency is we've invested in some precision organic fertilizer applicator. We're actually applying the fertilizer right next to the plant. We've integrated soil moisture probes, not at the same level as the blueberries that Craig pointed out, but in our fields to do a little bit better on our water application timing for, number one, for efficiency, so that we're providing the plant everything it needs on a timely basis. And it also allows us to plan better to get in and do any weed control operations or fungicide, organic fungicide sprays or anything like that. So these are all fairly new things to the group here, and we'll continue to expand on that operation. So
that's great, Kevin. In the organic production systems, making sure you do every task on time is so important. It's one of the reasons why we were expanding the program with granular. So just so that the investors understand, we now have all 15,000 acres under granular operations management software. So we create these crop plans for all 15,000 acres, and they are co-owned basically, or the parent company also owns the satellite imaging company. So we were able to get all 15,000 acres under granular and the regular satellite imaging for about $25,000, and that cost is split between both funds. It's an absolute bargain for the value that we get out of it. So we'll talk more about that in the future, but this is just a really good, it's a nice preview. We're going to go through quick so we have time to answer some questions. Wanted to show you, these are some cattle that we have up in Oregon. We're going to kind of close on the livestock pictures side. Here's some sheep and cattle that we have up there, and here's a new member of our family as well. So the sheep are just really doing well. We've been basically improving the genetics over the past 8 years for the closed flock, and we also lease some ground out to other sheep producers. But I don't know if cuteness seems to be one of the things that we're trying to help breed in. Quickly talking about Fund 1 results. The new investor portal is, right now it has good summary information. It should have your investment documents in there. It should have your investment documents in there. And it also shows the summary information about our returns. So the net investor gain is 69.7%. The IRR, which is the time return on average for the fund, is about 9.6%. $82.5 million worth of assets, and just around a little over 30% LTV. So we have just a limited amount of debt on this fund. We will be doing the distribution in about the next 30 days or so. And there are some questions, so let's address some of those really quickly. So feel free again to use the Q&A feature to ask questions. And so let's see, first question, what about organic avocados? Organic avocados, so it's very location dependent. They require a lot of water and deep soil and a low water table. And they're very labor intensive, actually. So avocados are all hand harvested. And so, and if there's strong winds, the fruits will bruise and not be sellable. So that just creates a lot of risk for us. We're actually really focused on the blueberries with mechanical harvesting. So normally fresh market blueberries are hand harvested and then sold, which is a very high cost for the hand harvesting, but you get great revenue for it. What we're planning to do is to machine harvest everything at a lower cost and use optical sorting technology to sort between fresh market blueberries and frozen market blueberries. And so basically be able to get the lower cost of harvesting and high grading the fruit to make sure we get the maximum revenue per acre on those two things. And if need be, if the prices are very different between the two, we can steer them from one channel to the other as well. So there's, and that was a key part of the negotiations that we had with Driscoll's as well. There's also a question about what about dried blueberries and or freeze-dried blueberries. So the frozen blueberries are IQF, individually frozen by Firestone, and basically for any of the fruit, we can send it to any distribution channel, whether it's frozen, freeze-dried, dried, juice, etc. And the only constraint is that for the Driscoll plants, anything that's sold on the fresh market from those 50 acres of plants has to go through Driscoll's. But we have the opportunity to use any of the channels otherwise as we see fit. We're not tied to Driscoll's being able to control what we do. It's a great relationship that we've established with Driscoll's. Fund 1 is growing only for Driscoll's or for Driscoll's and others. Is Driscoll's contract fixed price or what determines pricing? So that market graph, so we basically pay Driscoll's 10% of the market price for their work on distributing the crops. So they're really working on maximizing the overall price that they're getting. They charge essentially a fixed commission on that, and we get everything else. By us serving that early market window, we expect to have, where there's not a lot of other fresh organic production happening in this area or in the U.S., we expect to get nice high prices for the crop. But it is market dependent. They're not just writing us a fixed check. We think that's the right strategy for us, and will result in the most revenues. When will distributions be paid? So we're basically planning on, if you haven't already, let us know your banking information. Kirsten's preparing to do either ACH transfers or checks out to people. So do work with Kirsten, and I think key is updating your information on the investor portal. And that's going to be our #1 way of, that'll allow us to actually do ACH transfers, automated ACH transfers to everybody. And again, that'll be about 3% of your investment amount. When will the next revaluation be? So we revalue the properties every year, every 12 months, and the valuation is really set by the GAAP financials, which don't include appreciation. That's the cost basis of the farmland, plus the third-party independent appraisals. We have issues with the appraisers for example, the blueberry ground is valued just at actually a little bit less than the costs that we've put into it. And once they start producing, then they'll get to that market value of what a producing blueberry field should be valued at. But for right now, it doesn't even essentially recapture all of our costs in that. As you can tell, we've feel like we've created a lot of value. That doesn't always show up on the fund side of things, but we're not going to complain about 69.7% net gain on that. And we do expect that to continue to increase over time. The appraisers also we sold Brentwood for basically $16,000 an acre, and they valued Burns, which previously had been valued at more per acre, farmable acre, than Brentwood. They valued it at less than Brentwood this year at $15.3 thousand per acre. We can't control these things, but that's the appraisal process, and that's it's a good independent way of valuing things. Is Midwestern flooding good for farmland LP? Wow. Kirsten wants me to say that we should acknowledge that we're going a little past 11. Yeah. So couple quick things. Is Midwestern flooding good for farmland LP? And then we're going to wrap up. Climate change is just happening. It's been really interesting to see the Midwestern farmers and bankers and everyone that I work with start to think that climate change might have something going on. And we've really baked in climate change into our analysis, really focused on that in all of our cropping plans. And it does help us to some extent on a short term, but it's just bad all the way around. And same with the trade wars. Trade wars don't affect us. We don't grow corn, we don't grow soy for the commodity markets. And Midwest farmland is very, very different than West Coast farmland. Organic farmland is very different than the commodity crop markets. So we think we're very differentiated, and our markets are doing very well. Question was asked on what's the capex on the blueberries. The blueberry, to plant the blueberries is about $25,000 to $30,000 per acre. So it's a substantial investment in there, and that actually includes all of the costs to get you through production and profitability. It's not just the upfront cost. That's why we spent the time and the very little money to do the detailed soil testing and the custom application of the sulfur, because we want to get all those things right because it pays off so well. Each blueberry plant, if you do one test every 10 acres, that's fine. But the blueberry plant, that individual blueberry plant, only sees like an 18-inch diameter around it. It needs that soil to do very well, and for that individual plant to do maximum production and have maximum health. And so we really want to make sure that we create a nice, custom, happy, healthy soil environment for each and every plant that we're managing. Give it just the right amount of water and everything else. So we think we're doing all the right things. It takes a long time. It takes a long time to show real value, but we hope this gives you a good background in terms of what we're doing, not just in the blueberries, but really in all our crops and with everything that we're doing. With that, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you so much for supporting Farmland LP. I didn't answer all the questions. We'll get back to you individually and answer any questions that you have. If you have any further ones, do please email us. Thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to doing this regularly, and have a wonderful summer. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much.